Blessed are those who do hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled. In this verse, it seems Christ is likening a strong desire for God and holy living to one's desire for food and water. We can all relate to hunger and thirst in remembering a time when we had to go a long period without such amenities such as food and water. Even those of us in the first world can experience hunger pains, if at no other time. Say a time when we had to fast before a medical procedure, or we were just too busy to find time to eat. How much more then could people that live in less developed nations, where supplies of food and clean water are much less secure? But there's also another characteristic of hunger and thirst. It is something we experience daily and have to consistently work to abate. Most people, for example, eat 3 meals a day plus snacks to keep hunger at bay. We also drink water and other hydrating fluids throughout the day to satisfy our thirst. So let's relate this to our desire for God and to live righteously. Christ is telling us that those who hunger and thirst after these things with the same urgency as they do for food and water when they are hungry, these will be blessed. I think it is also relevant that this is something we do daily. We seek to meet our physical needs for literal food and water on a daily, even hourly basis. Perhaps we should be seeking our spiritual food in a similar fashion. As I was composing this, the verse where Jesus declares, "Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God," came to mind. There are many who hunger and thirst after food and water that will sustain the flesh, but food and water alone will not sustain your spiritual life. It will not lead to the ultimate fulfillment found in walking with God and living a clean life. The temptation that leads many astray is to focus only on the needs and desires of the flesh and to become overly sensual and or materialistic. This is where we seek fulfillment in all the wrong places but ultimately come up empty and unsatisfied. This trap can take many forms. Alcohol and substance abuse, which can give temporal satisfaction, but quickly leads to ruin in the life of the addict. Likewise, the sex addict finds only fleeting visions of satisfaction, giving way to feelings of emptiness and often shame. There is a near endless parade of material pursuits that people can and do turn towards to fill the void and satisfy their appetites. Many are overtly destructive, and all can be ultimately frustrating if they fail to secure lasting happiness. But in this verse, the saints are promised, "Blessed are they which do hunger and thirst after righteousness." For in contrast to the many worldly pursuits, those that hunger and thirst after righteousness, ultimately they will be filled, they will be satisfied. I'm going to make one last analogy and then I'm going to cite some commentaries. We can relate this to, say, healthy food versus junk food. Say processed food that's ladled with extra sugar, fat and salt, things like that. Now you can hunger and thirst after both healthy food and junk food. And in the moment, either one's going to fill up your stomach. But which one's going to lead to lasting health and a better quality of life? Well, the junk food, while often loaded with calories, is often void of any other nutritional value. It's just empty calories. And it's also full of excesses. Some fat and the right kinds of fat are good for you, but many junk foods are intentionally filled with excessive amounts of fat, and usually not the healthiest types of fat. Same with they're loaded with extra sugars, more so than you would find in more natural, healthy foods. This has the effect of even dulling the senses, where it just doesn't taste good anymore unless it's junk food, unless it has all that extra fat and sugar in it. So junk food even has an addictive nature to it, because eating it in the now it tastes really good, and momentarily it makes you feel good. But the long-term effects of filling up on junk food is obesity and often degenerative diseases. It leads to a prolonged condition in many of being both overweight and malnourished at the same time. Overweight because you're consuming far too many calories, malnourished because the food you're eating is so nutrient poor that while you're eating all these calories, you're not actually getting the other life-supporting, health-promoting nutrients that you need to thrive. As with the healthy food, initially it doesn't always taste that good. That said, once you acquire a taste for healthy food, junk food becomes less attractive to you. After getting used to eating, say, multigrain bread, white bread no longer appeals to me. After getting used to drinking water and juice, soda no longer appeals to me. In fact, it kind of tastes gross, and all that excess sugar makes me jittery. But in pursuing the healthy food and consuming that, not only do you acquire a taste for it, but long term, it leads to a much fuller quality of life. You'll be healthier, you'll have more energy, you'll get sick less, you'll be less likely to experience degenerative diseases later in life. Your skin will clear up, you'll have a clearer complexion, your weight will stabilize, etc. So, carry over this analogy to your spiritual life. There's a myriad of things you could turn to try to satisfy your spirit. You could turn to sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and that might be very attractive in the short term. Long term, it leaves you high and dry and unsatisfied. Just think of all the famous musicians who live lives of luxury, high on their fortune and fame and substance abuse, sescapades, etc. But ultimately, it apparently doesn't lead to any lasting fulfillment because, many of them end up dead either by suicide by their own hand or by drug overdose. Other perils of riotous living. But suppose you choose better. Suppose you choose to satisfy your spirit by seeking God and by seeking clean living, trying to live righteously as you interact with your fellow man, trying to set a good example as opposed to a corrupt example, say the fast-living rock star seeking fulfillment in, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. What this verse seems to be telling us is to eat the spiritual equivalent of health food if you want to be satisfied and find lasting contentment in your soul. So reading excerpts from a few commentaries, Elcott's commentary for English readers, the craving of bodily hunger has become a parable of that higher yearning after righteousness, that thirsting after God, even as the heart desireth the water brooks, which is certain in the end to gain fruition. Desires after earthly goods are frustrated, or end in satiety and weariness. To this only belongs the promise that they who thus hunger and thirst shall assuredly be filled. Reading from Benson's commentary, blessed are they which hunger and thirst after righteousness, that instead of desiring the possessions of others, and endeavoring to obtain them by violence or deceit, and instead of coveting this world's goods, sincerely, honestly, and perseveringly desire universal holiness of heart and life, or deliverance from all sinful dispositions and practices, and a complete restoration of their souls to the image of God in which they were created. Blessed are those who do hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled.